We're doubling the budgets that we set aside for investment in flood protection across the country, from 2.6 to 5.2 billion. So we're looking at things like making these sorts of structures more permanent, more secure, but also looking at what we can do to upstream to plant millions more trees to tackle the catchment areas of the water.
Why weren't you here then? Why weren't you here when it was at its worst, so you could see just how bad it was? Why now?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's a very simple answer to that, and that is that it's all too easy for a Prime Minister to come to a place in the middle of an emergency. It's not so easy, frankly, for the emergency services, because what they have to do is then break off, and as you know, the Gold Command has to find somewhere to brief you. Everybody has to gather there. They're then diverted from their work for hours and hours. What I've been doing since the flooding began is coordinating the national response, but also looking at what we can do in the next months and years to ensure that this country really is ready to cope with the impacts of flooding. And there are very beautiful and interesting things you can do, things that will generate jobs for the long term, things that will make the landscape more beautiful. We can change the way we fund agriculture, for instance, to change the way we support farmers, to encourage them to plant more trees, to put in flood defences, to manage the water upstream, and all of that we're now going to be able to look at.
People here want the guarantee that they will be safe. Can you guarantee that you can protect these houses and the people?
Well, obviously, as the Environment Agency has just said, we've got to make sure that people have to take some precautions themselves if they're living in a flood risk area. That's obviously common sense, but we must make sure that we put in stuff that can be useful in the long term.
People are beginning to panic. What can you say, what can you do to try and reassure, try and stop that panic, and will you be giving an open chequebook to the NHS to try and control and beat this virus?
Yeah, first thing on the people's responses to the news and buying in shops and so on. We've had no advice from the scientific advisors or the medical officers that there's any need for people to buy stuff in. If you think you've got symptoms, then the best thing to do is, as you know, is to stay at home, contact the NHS, and yes, absolutely, we will make sure that we give the NHS all the support, all the investment it needs to cope with this crisis.